Hi, everyone. I'm Giulio Coraggio, technology partner at DLA Piper, and this is the podcast, The Retail Digitale. Today, I'm delighted to have here Anne Cavoukian, Executive Director at the Global Privacy and Security Design Center. Welcome, Anne, and thank you for accepting our invitation.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Giulio.
Anne, you are one of the global influencers around privacy. You created the concept of privacy by design, but your whole life was dedicated to privacy compliance. Can you tell us a bit about your career and the different stages?
Of course. I was Privacy Commissioner of Ontario, Canada for 3 terms, like 17 years, so a very long time. And when I first started, you see, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a psychologist. I studied psychology and law in graduate school, but I'm a psychologist, that's my mind frame. So when I started, I wanted something different from the regulatory compliance after the privacy harms have taken place. You apply the law and you have a wonderful solution. That's very important. But it was always after the fact. I wanted a model of prevention. I wanted to ideally prevent privacy harms from arising. So at the beginning of my first term as privacy commissioner, literally over 3 nights at my kitchen table, I created privacy by design. And the reason I did that is I wanted something proactive that could ideally serve to prevent the privacy harms from arising, much like a medical model of prevention. And it took a while to convince my lawyers at the office of this. It wasn't something they were used to, but they understood that I wanted both to go together. I wanted privacy by design and regulatory compliance through laws after the harm has taken place. So we worked together, and I think we created a very successful venture. I mean, privacy by design has been translated into 40 languages. It's amazing. Not a week would go by when I wouldn't hear from some jurisdiction as to what they were doing to ensure that privacy was proactively protected. So I'll stop there, and then I can go through all of the 7 foundational principles if you want, but I just wanted to give you that introduction.
No, absolutely. Am I right in saying that your idea behind privacy rights is more a sort of European idea, where privacy is an essential principle, is a right that pertains to an individual, and it cannot be commercially traded, while maybe the US approach to privacy is more around something that I can control, I can trade. It's more similar to confidentiality.
Yes. And you have to understand, I'm not opposed to commercial ventures. My mindset and what is different about privacy by design is it's not either or win-lose. It's not privacy versus commercial interests or privacy versus security. It's both. I always want people to get rid of the dated zero-sum mindset of either or win-lose. You can only have one interest prevail. That's nonsense. That's so yesterday. I want you to have privacy and fill in the blank. I always laugh. Before COVID, the Canadian Marketing Association used to invite me to be the guest speaker at their annual conference every year. And I always used to go and I'd say, I'm sure I'm the least popular speaker here. And fortunately, they would laugh and the audience would say, no, but we know we need to have you here. And why they liked me there is I never said privacy or marketing. I said privacy and marketing. You need to have both. Privacy is not anti-marketing, it's pro-choice. The user, the data subject's wishes have to be reflected and respected. But Giulio, let me take you back even further. You wanted to ask my interest in privacy, and it was very European. You said, sure. Well, let me tell you what it came by. And if you don't mind, I'll tell you a little story.
Absolutely.
I'm Armenian. That's my background. And my grandparents, God bless them, they were going to be in the Armenian genocide, 1915. They were in the prison waiting to be killed the next day. My grandparents, my father was 3 years old at the time with them, and my uncle and aunt. And my grandfather's thinking, what can I do to save my family? He's, wanting to save his family. What does he know how to do? He was a painter, a beautiful artist. But so what, right? You think, never ever say nothing can happen. Here's what happened. My grandmother's telling me this story. She said, your grandfather always asked me to carry charcoal and parchment paper wherever we went because he loved to etch. And earlier in the day, my grandpa had seen the general Pasha, the Turkish general, the whole thing. And that night, from memory, my grandma said, I lit a candle, and from memory, your grandfather etched a portrait of General Pasha. And in the morning, he rolled it up, gave it to the soldiers who were taking us out to be killed, she said. And my grandfather said, please give this to General Pasha with my regards. And the soldier said, stupid man, what's he going to want to do with this? Forget. So my grandfather thought that was it. They were all going to die that day. Amazingly, minutes before they're about to be killed, on horseback, very, very fast, waving the parchment paper, comes General Pasha. And he says, who did this? I want to know who did this. And my grandfather says, Efendi, sir, in Turkish, I did it with my regards. The general said, I like it very much. You and your family, you're free to go. That's what saved my family. I wouldn't be here today talking to you. And that's why freedom and privacy is so important. My grandma, you just used to describe what it was like to be in the prison. And she said, if you uttered a word in favor of Armenians, you were killed right there on the spot. She said, we were always looking over our shoulders, whispering, wondering. Oh, horrible. Privacy, freedom. These are essential. And that's how I want to live my life, to ensure that continues.
No, absolutely. Thank you for telling us this story. It's absolutely fascinating. You said that obviously privacy is...
May I say one more thing? The other reason I tell this story is the odds of my grandfather succeeding were remote. They were next to nothing. But it worked. He got us out. So whenever people say, oh my God, give up on privacy, there's so much surveillance going on these days, forget about it. There's no way you're going to be able to succeed at privacy. I say nonsense. You never give up. No matter how small the odds, we have enormous successes. You prevail. Sorry, Giulio.
No, absolutely. Thank you for telling us this story. I think privacy is often confused with confidentiality, while, as you said, privacy is transparency, is freedom of choice. And I don't know if you concur, that also is an argument against those that believe that privacy is going to limit the economic growth of the market. Because if I'm telling you what I'm doing with your data and I give you a freedom of choice, how am I limiting your control on data? Basically, I'm empowering you. Obviously, I'm also telling you that if you don't give consent to processing of your data, I'm not able to give you some services because that data will somehow be connected to the processing of the data. So you are fully acknowledged of the pros and cons of any sort of choice.
Giulio, I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's ridiculous that privacy curbs business interests. It does the exact opposite. I offer a privacy by design certification for companies that want to show that they're doing privacy by design and that they're doing it properly. They come to me and with their consent, I send KPMG in to look under the hood and make sure they're doing it properly. And if they are, I give them a certification. And they've told me that has given them such gains, that what privacy by design certification has done for them is it assures their customers that their privacy is protected and that this company is going to great lengths to respect their privacy. They love that. And what the company tells me is it builds trusted business relationships where trust is just so diminished these days. So they love it because it builds trusted business relationships and they gain a competitive advantage over the other guys who don't respect privacy. And what I've been told is if a secondary use arises for the customer's information that they hadn't consented to, The company goes back to the customer and seeks their consent for the secondary use. And what I've been told is that they always get it because the customers trust them, they believe in what they do. So it's a win-win. That's why I want people, businesses to understand privacy works to your advantage, not the opposite.
But do you think that the individuals are already enough mature to understand the value of their data? I mean, we're talking about always how data is all of the future, how everyone is investing in data, how whatever free service is not actually free because you are giving your data in return. But sometimes giving a privacy consent is just something unknowing that people are often ignoring. So maybe too many consents are equal to a no choice because basically customers are just flagging whatever they see on their screen.
I agree that you don't want to overwhelm people with consent notices all over so that there are thousands of them and it's impossible to process. So one of the things I love about privacy by design is privacy as the default setting. This is a huge game changer. And as you know, in the European Union, they've included privacy by design and privacy as the default, specifically in the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. And what this says, it says to people, look, you don't have to search through all the terms of service and all the legalese in the privacy policy for the opt-out box that says, do not use my personal information for any purpose other than the primary purpose of the data collection that I'm consenting you. We don't come back to you and seek additional consent and you've always got to be looking at this. No, we flip it on its head. Privacy as the default setting means that we give you privacy automatically. You don't have to search for it. You don't have to give your consent. We do it automatically. Privacy is the default. We are only permitted to use your personal information for the primary purpose of the data collection. Beyond that, we can't do anything with it. And the beauty of that is it builds such trust. It's a game changer, Giulio.
No, absolutely. If you don't mind, I would dig into some of the hottest topics around the privacy of the last days. It comes to my mind the decision by Google to ban in 2022 third-party cookies where they are collected through their networks or through Chrome browser. What do you think that what the impact of this decision will be? Because obviously Google has a huge market share when it comes to online advertising.
I applaud Google for doing this. They said that they're charting a course towards a more privacy-first web, and I believe that. Now, what's been driving Google to do this, and they're leaving third-party cookies. They're going to be gone in terms of any kind of consent. They said that 72% of people feel that virtually everything they do online is being tracked by advertisers and tech firms and other companies, and they don't like it. 81% said that the potential risks they face because of that data collection outweigh any benefits, according to Pew Research Center, and they don't like digital advertising if it involves that kind of requirement that their identities are revealed and all that with the third-party cookies. So I am very pleased that Google is going in this direction because it's also driving other parties to go in this direction. And you see, that's why I always say to people, never give up. Just because surveillance is mounting, you never give up. There are things like this. And also decentralized identity. There's a whole movement now. There's a Decentralized Identity Foundation consisting of all the major companies, Microsoft, IBM, etc. And this is huge, where individuals can control their identity and their identifying information, and it can be secured in a secure enclave in the cloud, for example, but you're now in control. It's not centralized. Everybody can't have access to it. That's increasingly the world that I think we are going to, Giulio, because there is such distrust. And I think this is going to build a much better internet.
No, no, absolutely. And I think this is a process that somehow was led by Europe once again. I don't know if you concur that the European Union in some ways is leading the global regulation around privacy and data protection, and the privacy regulation that now seems to be closer to be adopted, maybe in somehow was pushing these tech giants to take such a harsh decision.
Well, one of the things is there has never been greater concern for privacy as there is now. For the last 2 years, all of the public opinion polls, Pew Research, etc., have all come in at the 90 percentile for concern for privacy. 90% very concerned about their privacy. 92% very concerned about loss of control over their personal information. And privacy is all about control, personal control over the use and disclosure of your information. So given those unbelievably high levels of concern for the past 2 years, everyone, companies and governments, are starting to listen and saying, we got to do something about this. And don't think that the governments, especially here in Canada and the United States especially, don't think that they don't collect information as well. They want to be in control of people's information. So we have to have this movement, ensure that control returns to the data subject, to the individual, and they can do what they want with it. You don't always say, look, privacy is not a religion. You want to give away your information? Be my guest, as long as you make the decision to do so. It's your personal information. And I'd say to both governments and companies, just because you may have custody and control of someone's personal information doesn't mean it belongs to you. It doesn't. It belongs to the individual.
I laugh because this is a really European concept as opposed to maybe an American concept where it comes, for instance, to the privacy employees. I hear so often that from especially US clients where they say, I can control everything an employee does with this computer because the computer belongs to the company. So I can access to whatever email is sent or to any data on their PCs because it's a company asset. And it comes to my mind that another very hot topic of the last days is how employers can check whether their employees have been vaccinated against COVID-19.
It's absolutely vile. The whole employer relationship, when because of COVID, everyone's working remotely from home, it's outrageous. You know, employers think, oh, we can have access to everything that they're working on because, you know, where we give them the computer, they're using our programs, so we have total control. No, you don't. You may have control over work-related jobs that you've given your employees, and they have to report to you, and I understand that. But there's a whole range of activities you do not have a right of access to. You don't have a right of access to what's going on in people's homes and other activities. It's absurd. And that's how we have to get past this. And the whole vaccine passport thing drives me crazy, Giulio. Countries all over the world are developing vaccine passports as well as employers who want to know them. And it's like there's no privacy whatsoever. They expect the central government, the company, to have complete access to all this health information. No, I've been working in this field, as you might imagine, and I do so many media interviews on this. And I tell them, this is very personal information. Your health data is the most sensitive data in existence. I'm working with Identity 2020, which is a health ID foundation, and we're creating something called the Good Health Pass. It's a blueprint for how companies like the IATA Travel Pass and others, how they should be collecting information, and there should be no centralized collection or retention of this data. If I get a vaccine, let's say, and we ever get to travel again, I go to the airport, I will have on my mobile digital information that has a record of my vaccine, which I can show the attendant at the airport. They can see that I've had the vaccine, but that's it. They don't get to keep the information. They don't get any other information associated with that. It is retained on my device, no central retention whatsoever. Companies cannot gain access to this. But
that is correct. because sometimes the position of companies that they need to secure their working environment, and for that purpose, they believe that they can get access to any sort of data, while it's not that you're putting your company at risk, because you can achieve the same goal preserving privacy compliance. I mean, it's not a straight line. It takes more time maybe, but then you are actually protecting your asset, and you're not putting your other employees at risk.
Exactly. This is the data that needs to be so strongly protected. And the last thing you want your company to do is have a database full of all this health information associated with their employees. No, that can never be the model. There can be certain assurances provided, but we have to change the model of somehow governments and companies thinking that they should be able to retain all this sensitive personal information. They shouldn't. I worked with the Ontario government here in Canada to develop something called the COVID Alert. This is an app individuals can voluntarily choose to download that will alert them if they come within 2 meters of someone who is tested positive for COVID. And we base this on the Apple-Google framework, the API that Apple-Google developed together, which is rare. They don't work together very often. They chose to do this because most people's mobile devices are either Apple or Google. And when I was studying this before advising the government, Apple contacted me on 2 occasions, and because they know I want to look under the hood. I always say trust but verify. They walked me through all of the details associated with the code. I saw the code they were doing, and they were absolutely right. No personal information is being collected whatsoever. Your privacy remains completely intact. Everything is the strongest data protection possible. So with that understanding, I worked with the Ontario government and said, okay, our COVID alert, we have to base it on the Apple-Google framework, and we did. And it's not called a contact tracing app. It's called exposure notification app because it alerts you if you've been exposed to someone who has COVID. It's a wonderful model. Germany based their model on it, and many countries around the world.
No. We have the same types of apps, I think, in most of the European countries. Last question.
Yes.
And you represented a very interesting scenario how privacy creates trust for of your customers and just brings value to your company. If you should give just a piece of advice on how companies need to approach the digital transformation, the technological evolution of the coming years, where data becomes always a more valuable asset, but at the same time, they need to be preserved. What is the main recommendation that you would give them?
If you're dealing with customers, I always say lead with privacy, because you will build such strong respect and trust that will otherwise be lacking. And this will not be to your detriment. It will aid the company and their business interests. I always say be very clear with your customers. Transparency is critical. Tell them what you intend to do with their personal information and the reason you're asking for their consent to use it in a particular context. Be very straight. They have to know what you're doing with it, and then live by that. It makes such a difference. Giulio, I've worked with hundreds of companies who have done this, and they call me all the time, give me stories of how strongly privacy has built their enterprise. It's given them a competitive advantage. And also things like, one of the requirements is keep it user-centric, give people access to their own personal information that you as a company collect on them. Companies have called me and they say, we love this, because when we give individuals access to their own personal information, they alert us if there's a mistake or if it's changed. They say, oh, no, that was the case 2 years ago. Now it's this. So it has enhanced the quality of the information we hold on people. So it's a total win-win. They love it. Your customers will love it. And your business interests will increase, as will your customers' interests. That's what you want. You want a multifaceted positive gain on multiple sides.
No. That's really right. And it makes me think also that legal design will acquire always more value, because legal design equals to transparency and creates more value. And thank you very much for your time. It was a very interesting chat. And I hope to see you soon, hopefully in person in Canada. As I told you, my family is
No, I want to come to Milan.
Okay, absolutely. You're going to be my guest.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, Giulio. Thank you. All the best. Bye-bye.